When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and brilliant marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify. They're the home of the #1 checkout on the planet and the not-so-secret Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales happening. Businesses that sell more sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds and Skims use. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/start selling. All lowercase. Go to shopify.com/start selling to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/start selling.
We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we record this podcast and pay our respects to elders past and present. We recognise their ongoing connection to land, waters and culture. We recognise that sovereignty was never ceded.
The case of Leongatha's Erin Patterson, who was recently convicted of murdering 3 relatives with a deadly mushroom meal, captured headlines around the world.
I'm devastated. I love them.
But did you know an even more prodigious killer lived in the same small Victorian farming community in the 1930s? Join Leongatha journalist Matt Dunn and special guests including author Katherine Kovacic and former Victoria Police Detective Narelle Fraser as they unearth the chilling story of serial killer Arnold Sodeman on Sodeman, the Schoolgirl Strangler. Episode 4. Ethel.
She, even though she was ostensibly, from this remote and perhaps slightly naive country girl, but she had been told you look out for strangers. Yeah.
Connection. He doesn't have to try and win her confidence or get her to like him because he knows the family. She would trust him.
This episode contains adult themes. Listener discretion is advised. After murdering Mina Griffiths and Hazel Wilson in the inner city Melbourne suburb of Ormond, the same suburb in which he lived, Arnold Sodeman took his family to New South Wales, ending up in the small town of Henty. Perhaps he was feeling the heat of living in a suburb where he'd killed 2 young girls. Perhaps he was looking for a new killing ground. In 1934, he and his wife Bernice and 6-year-old daughter Joan are living in Bear Street, Leongatha. On New Year's Day 1935, the Victorian seaside town of Inverloch is buzzing and the Sodemans are amongst the throng. Leongatha is an easy drive. 4 years have passed since the murders of Hazel Wilson and Mina Griffiths, and the crimes have slipped from the nation's collective memory. With so many children about on that day, it's an opportunity too enticing for Sodeman to ignore. The 12-year-old Ethel Belshaw from nearby Tarwin Meadows, her happy beach day turns into a brief but deadly encounter with a serial killer. The Inverloch Beach Carnival was a major draw card for the era. The popular tourist town continues to be a go-to destination for New Year's revellers. I meet with the author of The Schoolgirl Strangler, Katherine Kovacic, near the site where Ethel's body was discovered.
Yeah, so Inverloch's still, it's a beautiful Gippsland town now, but back in 1934, 1935, it was a small town, but it was already becoming a beach destination. So This time we've got cars are starting to become a thing. The motoring holiday was being advertised. If you had a car, you could be down here from Melbourne in a couple of hours. You could also get the train down from Melbourne, down to Wonthaggi, hop on a bus and be in Inverloch. All obviously locals, working around Wonthaggi, working in the dairying areas around us here in Gippsland would also come to Inverloch for holiday.
Yep.
And New Year's Day in particular, well, we all know of the summer beach holiday. It's an Australian tradition. So the normally very small town, lots of people down here staying 2 guest houses, 1 inn, but camping on the foreshore, just like people do down the peninsula and what have you. So this tiny town, New Year's Day has the added attraction of a beach carnival. So lots of day trippers from the surrounding area. Later estimates would put the crowd at first at 8,000.
Yeah.
But as things would go on, the crowd, or at least the number of people police had interviewed, went from 8 to 10 to 15, ultimately to 18,000 people police said they'd interviewed after the murder of Ethel Belshaw.
Yeah, wow. But former Victoria Police Detective Narelle Fraser believes these numbers were greatly exaggerated.
It doesn't sit comfortably with me, 18,000. That is an enormous amount of people to speak to. And I have to think you'd need an army of police. And really, it sounds to me like from the start they really haven't given it their best shot with Ethel. And, you know, they've been pretty, I don't know, I'd say almost they appear a bit lazy in certain instances. And I think to myself, 18,000 people, I've been involved in a fair few, big investigations. And I can't think of one of them where we would have spoken to anywhere near 18,000 people. And I'm thinking the only ones that come to my mind that might reach that threshold might be something like, say, Ivan Milat, the backpacker murders, maybe Mr. Cruel. I think they'd come close to, they'd come a lot closer to 18,000 than this investigation. I just find that they're gilding the lily, in my view.
For the listener, Ivan Milat, who was known as the Backpacker Killer, was convicted in 1996 for murdering 7 backpackers in New South Wales between 1989 and 1992. Meanwhile, Mr. Cruel, an unidentified predator active in Melbourne in the late 1980s and 90s, was linked to child abductions and the unsolved murder of a 13-year-old schoolgirl, Carmen Chan. Just like that case, the investigation into the schoolgirl strangler had gone cold.
But really, we've got 4 years of quiet. So even if it wasn't Bennett, maybe that person has died. So maybe they've whatever reason they were killing for, it's out of their system, or there was a motive that was unknown at the time that those girls were targeted specifically. Certainly in Inverloch, the thought of murder is not on anyone's mind. It's distant past, it's big city stuff, 150 plus kilometres away.
Yep.
It's done and dusted as far as everyone's concerned.
Yep. Now, Ethel, she lived down at Tarwin Meadows, quite sort of farming community. There was quite a sort of almost like a village on this particular farmer's farm where these farm workers gathered, and her family was amongst them.
Very much so. So the property was called Tarwin Meadows, and this tiny, as you said, village, Tarwin Meadows, 40 people.
Yeah.
Most of them worked on that property. Some of them were, had share farming arrangements on neighbouring properties, but very small community. People knew people. Ethel went to the school that was also in the church hall, that was also in the community hall. It's that kind of place.
Yeah, and she barely went out without being chaperoned by her brother or
that's right.
her older sister.
This was something that was emphasised later, that she didn't go out alone, even in that small community. She was either going out with her 19-year-old sister to look after her, or an 11-year-old brother, which is interesting. The brother who's 1 year younger than her, but somehow being the male, he is the chaperone. And Ethel's father would also later say that he had talked to her about the facts, and also he had talked to her about strange men and being wary of strange men. And this was repeated throughout, the trials and things later.
Yeah.
That she, even though she was ostensibly from this remote and perhaps slightly naive country girl, but she had been told you look out for surrenders.
Yeah. Ethel had been invited to travel with her friend, 8-year-old Margaret Knights. With them were Margaret's parents, her 2 brothers Raymond and Gordon, and 2 other adults, Mr. James Jenkins and Mrs. Madge Rule. Jenkins was Mrs. Knight's nephew by marriage. He was also Gordon Knight's boss, and the 18-year-old building apprentice would board with him in Melbourne when the work was on. It was this master-servant relationship and the pair's proximity to Ormond that would later come under police scrutiny. Ethel was described as being an attractive girl who looked 1 or 2 years older than her actual 12 and a half. She had long, fair hair with a tinge of auburn. It hung below her waist. She was 147 centimetres or 4 foot 10 inches tall. Big thing for her, wouldn't it?
Huge day. Yeah, this is really exciting. I mean, first of all, she's being chaperoned by the parents, but to be out without the family, she's 12 years old, and the excitement of driving down, you get the truck, everyone's bailed in the back of the truck, and going off this big adventure for the beach, for a day at the beach. What could be better?
Yep. And I think like when she disappears, and I mean we'll get to that a little bit later, but when she disappears, the response to her disappearance was so casual.
It's basically non-existent.
Yeah.
Yeah, no one's at all fussed.
Yeah.
I guess she's a reliable girl. Her mother would say later that she had been told to behave herself, and she's a good girl, so she had been behaving herself. And, it's a small group in a small community. She went to the ice cream shop. She's gone far. She's met someone that she knows. She's caught up with something. She'll be back. She knows we're going back at a certain time. She knows afternoon tea will be on. She's a hungry kid. She'll be back for afternoon tea.
Yeah.
No one's worried at all.
Yeah. And what was actually happening that day? Like, what were the festivities that were on that?
So the beach carnival was a big event in Inverloch, and the family that she was with, they arrived here around midday. They had lunch, tomato sandwiches and tea. And most of the carnival took place in the afternoon. There was events. There was the Miss Inverloch, so the standard beauty parade. There's sort of a beach beauty in your bathing costume. There was something called the pajama parade, which is not pajamas as we think of it, but this is like, think of your 1920s, your lounging suit, your chic woman. That is a beach pajama. So this is what you just look elegant in. So another fashion parade later, and then there were events. There were swimming events for girls and boys. There was a mixed event. There's crazy things like the greasy barrel, which is balancing on a barrel on a pole over the water for as long as you can. Yeah. Various water sports, various events throughout the day. Just a fun day for New Year's Day, and the weather was perfect. It was like mid to high 20s, glorious day at the beach.
Yeah, I feel like we're revisiting Mina's murder, idyllic, surroundings. Everyone's quite relaxed, and in comes Sodeman. I mean, is there any way to piece together how he saw that opportunity? Did he know the girl in any sort of sense?
Yeah, well, he knew Ethel. He spent some time in Tarwood Meadows, very briefly, but he'd done a bit of, just temporary work on the dairy farm. So he'd met her.
Right.
And he was here with another group of people. He wasn't living in Inverloch at the time, but he was here. Same thing, day at the beach carnival. And at one point when Ethel and her friend Margaret were walking up from the beach, they were in their bathing suits. We know this. So they were coming up from the beach, and he was sitting there talking to someone else, and he saw them, and Ethel saw him, and she called out because she's a polite girl. So she went over and she said, "Good day." And he said, "You're having a good time?" And she said, "Yes." And then she shivered, and he said, "You cold." And she said, "Yes, I'm going to get dressed." And the girls disappeared. Now, this we later found out was at about 3:30ish in the afternoon, and events as they would unfold happened much later. So this was sort of a sidebar, but that was he knew she was there. He knew she was there from that point. And while he remained with the people he was with, he obviously watched her walk away into the crowd at that point, and he was in a position where if she came back that way, he would see her again.
Yeah, okay. So I guess he's kind of honed in on her. We know that he, like we said previously, he charms. He doesn't, doesn't grab them. And obviously, if there's 8, 10, 15,000 people around, you can't be dragging people away.
That's right.
Narelle believes that having met Ethel would have given Sodeman a huge advantage.
Have to, let's say like Mina. Like, he doesn't have to establish a connection. He doesn't have to try and win her confidence or get her to like him, because he knows the family. She would trust him. She's just, there would be no question about if Sodeman says, I don't know, let's go for a ride or a walk or whatever. I just think it's not like a stranger. He wouldn't have to gain her confidence at all. It would have been easy to say, let's do this or let's do that. And, kind of little girl that she was, wouldn't have been a question in her mind, because he knows mum and dad,
But behind the friendly smile, there were dark intentions.
Maybe, you know what? Maybe he actually liked the power and the killing. I mean, we can't imagine it. But it sounds to me like it was like quite sort of thrilling for him. He really, I feel even wrong saying it, but like he really enjoyed the whole thing. Getting them and taking them somewhere and killing them and tying them up, and like he just had no conscience. He's a frightening man.
We know from later testimony that Sodeman would go to the pub that afternoon. We will also learn that alcohol was often a trigger for his violent behaviour.
Yeah, so we'll come to about 4:30 in the afternoon. So most of the events had happened. There's still a couple of things, the carnival, as these things, there was running a little bit late. Most of the main events had happened. We've still got the pajama parade and the greasy barrel to go. Margaret and Ethel, by this stage, they've finished swimming. They've gone and got changed. They're back in their frocks. But, ice cream. You've got to have ice cream when you're at the beach. They've already had one or two. They decide they want one more. So they get some money. There was a little bit of an issue because Margaret had purloined some money from her older brother Gordon, and he was not happy about that. Yeah. So she gets some money from the adults. Ethel's already been sent with her money for the day, so now they've got the same amount.
Yeah.
Margaret and Ethel, we're going to get some ice cream. Gordon comes with them because Margaret says, I'll put your money back in the car. So he's stopped off with the girls to make sure he gets his coin back.
Right.
And they all head off in the same direction. They get to the car, and then the girls head off to the ice cream shop, Mrs. Donahue's ice cream shop, and Gordon comes back to the family where they're picnicking in the direction of the pier.
Yeah.
The girls head on to the ice cream shop. Late in the day, everyone wants their ice cream, so there's a queue out the door.
Yep.
Ethel gets served first. She heads outside with her ice cream to wait. Margaret comes out just a couple of minutes later, and Ethel's gone.
Okay. Which has echoes of what happened with Mina and her sisters. Yep. So yeah. For the listener, I came to this story while working as a reporter for Leongatha's local newspaper, the Great Southern Star, colloquially known as The Star. Founded in 1890, the paper closed at the beginning of Victoria's COVID lockdowns in 2020. It was a slow news day in 2012, and I was looking for a story. I randomly Googled the words murder and Leongatha. Up popped the Sodeman story. A chat with local historian Lynn Skillen gave me a clue. A woman who'd been a girl on January 1, 1935, had been with the Sodemans that day. Maureen Lewis, née Keary, who was a friend of Arnold's daughter Joan, had a startling story to tell about a lucky escape. Sodeman wanted to buy an ice cream for Maureen, but his wife said he could only do that if he also took Joan. Sodeman went cold on the idea. Maureen believes Sodeman's wife's intervention probably saved her life. Whatever Sodeman's intention that day, one thing was clear. He was going to kill.
From working side by side, to working together, to working wonders. Accelerate your operations with IT/OT convergence. Transform the everyday with Siemens.
Yeah, Mrs. Donahue's ice cream shop was on, I think, Beach Road, which is now part of the I want to say, the Esplanade. Yeah.
Yep.
So and it's still a sunny afternoon. It's daylight savings, that sort of thing. So, there's plenty of light. It's not like it's dusk. And Margaret comes back with her ice cream and her mum says, well, where's Ethel? And she said, don't know, missed her at the ice cream shop. And her mum says, well, go back and have another look. I'm going to set under the tea. And that's what happens there.
From the location of Ethel's body, we can only assume that Sodeman met her outside the ice cream shop and offered to walk her back towards her party. Along the way, however, they went inland. The evidence would suggest that Ethel was not murdered at the site where she was found, but at a place close by.
So, another cup of tea, still no sign of Ethel. 5 o'clock, 5:40, they're wrapping up. It's time to be heading back to town. There's cows to be milked in the morning, that sort of thing. Ethel's mum's waiting. So they're starting to get a bit anxious. They go out to have a bit more of a look, and then they notify the local constable, McCarthy, that she's been separated from the group. Yeah, she's in the crowd somewhere.
Yeah.
We're going to find her. We're just putting out to just keep an eye out for this girl. The nice long blonde hair, little bit of bourbon in it, white dress, blue belt. She's around somewhere. So they're not too worried. They just think, she's lost track of time. And that's where we are, 5:40, 6 o'clock.
Yeah. And, I mean, we probably don't need to point this out because it's near enough to 90 years ago, or it is 90 years ago. No mobile phones, no, I suppose, landline to get the message to her mum. So her mum is just waiting at home.
Yeah, no one's come back. I guess she's not expecting them back until a little bit later at this stage, but that's probably starting to be in the back of their minds. That they've got to get back. People are going to be missing them. Yes. The thing you'd be thinking of is if the whole group hasn't come back, there's been an accident of some sort that's taken them away.
Yeah. So fairly quickly, the police enlist people to search, don't they?
At this stage, they're just generally looking, but sort of about an hour or so later, they're realising that it's more than just she's missing in the crowd. People are starting to leave. So the Knights, Margaret's parents, alert the police that she is definitely missing. There's definitely something wrong. And this is when the cry goes up. So they're ringing bells. They're ringing the school bell. They're ringing the church bell. They're gathering strength for the public to get everyone out and searching for this little girl, his mum. She could swim, but, that's got to be a factor too. Has she gotten into trouble in the water? There's a couple of tidal currents. But they're thinking land search. They're still thinking that somehow she's maybe gotten disoriented in the, the tea tree and scrub that's down here.
Yeah.
Or, she's hurt herself. Something's happened.
Yeah.
And she's lost. She's injured. We just got to find this little girl.
Yeah.
So we're still not thinking someone's taken her.
Yeah.
We're still not thinking that there's any third party involved.
Yeah. So what time do they conclude the search on that night?
They basically don't. So coming up to midnight, the majority of the Tarwin Meadows group head back to Tarwin Meadows because they know Ethel's mum's going to be waiting. But Margaret's father and James Jenkins, the family, the cousin, they remain in town and they keep searching. And basically people pretty much keep searching through the night.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So dawn breaks. Now, James McInnes is out there on January 2, the next day, searching one of a lot of people sleep.
Yeah, dozens and dozens of people. So he was, I believe he's who worked at the mine at Wonthaggi. Mm-hmm. He was down here as part of a holiday. He was one of the volunteers. So I think we're around about 9 o'clock in the morning. He's given an area to search and he heads out. He's walking through the tea tree away from the Inverloch Central, just looking. Yeah. Pushing through little thickets of scrub, walking along the track, calling out. They're still calling. They're sent people on horses and on cars all the way along the road back to Tarwin Meadows, just in case for some reason she decided she was going to take herself home. So the search has gone far and wide by this stage, but they're still looking along the foreshore. And this local volunteer, that's what he's doing. He's just pushing through thickets of tea tree, looking for any sign of this little girl.
And what does he find?
Well, he finds her in a little clearing just to one side of the track. And she's lying face down and her hands are tied behind her back and her legs are tied together with some of her own underwear. And her purse and her shoes placed very neatly beside her body.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
So Mum's been brought down from Tarwin Meadows while the search was still ongoing, and so she's in Inverloch when they find the body, and she is told that her daughter is dead, but not the circumstances.
Yeah.
And even that was enough. She collapsed. She needed urgent medical attention.
Yeah.
The father's been informed. He's rushing up from Frankston, 100 kilometres away. But nothing they can do.
Yeah. So then the call goes out to the police in Melbourne, and quite a contingent comes down. Who's amongst the...
We have Detective Sloan. He's head. We had a local copper on the ground here, so he was actually here on holidays, and he took control of the scene to start off with. And the local doctor came to examine. He obviously wasn't used to dealing with crime scenes. He made some pronouncements about the manner of her death, and were ultimately proved to be wrong simply because he'd never seen someone who'd been strangled before. I would say that was the bottom line, but. Yes, we have the cops coming down from Melbourne, Detective Sloan. McCarroll, who's one of our senior officers, is pretty hot on the job. We have an Indigenous tracker who's only ever identified as Freddie. And a couple of constables. So I don't want to say they're rushing down from Melbourne because that actually becomes an issue lately. They come down from Melbourne and they don't actually arrive until 5 o'clock that afternoon. And that actually proves to be an issue for the pathologist because no one moved Ethel's body. She's just out there in the elements.
Yep.
And subsequently the pathologist would say, well, this, affected some of his findings. But they see what they see. They see the underwear used to tie her ankles, strips of her own clothing, her own belt used to bind her hands behind her back, her stocking, one stocking stuffed into her mouth, the other one tied around it that slipped, so as though perhaps that had been used to hold the gag in place or either to cover her eyes, one or the other. But again, the stockings, the strips of clothing, it's got to be a pattern that's familiar to these guys.
Yeah. No one's... Well, they may have made the connection in their minds, but no one's publicly saying anything other.
No, not at this stage, although there is one article that appears in a newspaper that just refers to the sign of the stockings. And there's various murder cases where stockings have been used to kill women, but it doesn't actually suggest that there is, 1 killer. It just says, what's with the stockings? Which, could have gone one step. So that was interesting. But yes, you can imagine that there are factors here that they've got to be thinking this is the same guy, although they could have a copycat because the case of Mina Griffiths and Hazel Wilson were very well publicised.
Yep.
Those aspects of the case were well publicised. So maybe something's gone wrong somewhere with someone's killed someone and thought, how am I going to cover this up? And they've thought of those cases. So that's got to be a factor that they're thinking about too.
And we'll explore that idea too, because we sort of have this idea of a master and an apprentice. More on my incomplete thoughts soon. Narelle said the tardy police response had an adverse effect on the investigation. So the fact that the police, took a little while to get from Melbourne.
A little while? That's an understatement. There's a few understatements in this story. Yeah.
So they didn't get to the scene. I think she was discovered around 10:30 on the 2nd, so the next day.
Yep.
AM. The police didn't get to the scene until 5 p.m.
They are losing vital evidence. Like that first 24 to 48 hours is the most important time in any investigation, but certainly with a murder like this, you lose people leave or they don't want to get involved. They see something, maybe they shouldn't be where they are, and it's all sorts of things. But God, what you lose evidence-wise from the scene, you can never get that back.
And the fact that her the post-mortem on her body, so she was taken to Wonthaggi. For the listener, Wonthaggi is about 13 kilometres or 8 miles from Inverloch. In the 1930s, it was a key coal mining town with a strong union culture and close-knit community.
Yeah.
and it was about 24 hours. So it was on the morning of Thursday, January the 3rd, so a full 24 hours after they'd found her. The post-mortem examination starts, and the body was, and this is a quote, considerably decomposed. What does that do as far as catching that killer?
Well, the body is, because it's decomposing and pretty quickly, you're losing some really vital evidence, like physical evidence, like the way that her body, where the blood had pooled, if she'd laid a certain position, like hair, semen, if there was a sexual assault, although we believe there wasn't, but you'd never know because, that sort of evidence, if you don't get that initially, often it's lost. So physical evidence, scientific evidence, trace evidence, it's changing all the time because of the time between the body being found and the body being at the coroner's court and being examined, the autopsy.
Yeah.
Like it's changing all the time. So it's not going to be you're really behind the eight ball, or the mortician, whoever's doing the autopsy, they're behind the eight ball from the start. You can only deal with what you can deal with.
Okay. And so the Indigenous tracker, Freddie, who seemed pretty astute, made some observations about the age of the perpetrator, which may have been misconstrued and probably put Gordon Knight in the front.
So Freddie gave us a few things. He discounted some car tyre treads that were found near the site. He said they were days old. He pointed out that there was no hair of Ethel's caught in any of the shrubbery. If she'd been carried into that place, her hair would have been caught in the shrubbery.
She had quite long hair.
She had quite long hair. It was down to her waist. And at this point, we know it was untied. So usually she'd have it in plaits, but it was untied because she'd been swimming.
Yeah.
But based on footprints that Freddie found, he said, you're not looking for an old man, you're looking for a young man. Now, it's a very relative concept, isn't it? But here we have Gordon Knight's family friend, 18-year-old boy, hormonal young boy, shall we say, someone who's known Ethel, and they know they're looking for someone, or they believe they're looking for someone that Ethel would have comfortably walked away with.
Yep.
And now Freddie said, we're looking for a younger man, so...
At just 18 years of age, Gordon Knights neatly fitted that description.
Then... But I think they just thought, well, she knew Gordon, that maybe that it was friendly.
Yeah.
But Gordon.
Yeah.
Gordon went too far.
Yeah. So what did they actually have legitimately on Gordon?
Well, absolutely nothing. I think the thing is, no one's Gordon's not wearing a watch because he's in and out of the water. He got nervous, obviously, because he fudged the times. I was at the Greasy Barrel. No, I was, I had my bathers on. No, I didn't. There was a little bit of, change of story from the first time he spoke to police to the last time. And of course, the first time he didn't have any legal representation because he thought he didn't need it. And, the last time he was well and truly lawyered up. So there is that. And then his father also probably thinking he was helping, messed around with the time a bit. No, Gordon definitely was in the water at 5 o'clock. Oh, no, he wasn't. It was later than that.
Yeah.
So there was just this little bit of, anxiety, and not even just anxiety, I think just legitimate lost track of time, because don't forget that in that period, they're also starting to get anxious about Ethel as well. So they're not necessarily thinking, well, it's 4:30 now. It's just the end of a long day, and you wait till when the sun starts to dip. That's when you start to think about going home.
Yep.
So they had nothing on Gordon, nothing at all.
But knowing how police operated back in those days, if Gordon was being questioned, they could have easily got heavy with him.
Yeah, there were certainly inferences, shall we say, of heavy-handed tactics, standover sort of stuff, and they're thinking, we saw this before with the other cases, that it was the released con, that was our Robert McMahon. It was the male relative, that was Hazel Wilson's dad. And now we've got the young male close family friend. It's, this is like police textbook, if it's an algorithm, isn't it? Tick yes, tick no. Okay, well, it's got to be this one. So he was just there. And yes, I think he was a country boy at heart. Yeah. Or he's a naive young man, and imagine an 18-year-old suddenly that you're the lead suspect in this massive murder investigation. You can understand why he was stumbling over his facts and tying himself in knots.
Poor Gordon. Oh, my goodness. Oh, God. He seems like he was a fine, upstanding young man, really. In Katherine's book, I cannot see anywhere where he has been treated fairly and as any suspect in such a serious offence would have been treated. He should have been, cautioned, read his rights, given an opportunity to speak to a solicitor. I can't see any of that. Cajoling him, come on, Gordon, you've done it, haven't you? Like, that's not how you interview somebody. You give them, it's their opportunity to give an account of where they were, what they were doing. But the police didn't care about that. Poor Gordon, he didn't stand a chance. They had him in their sights. And, again, it was just desperate tactics by the police. Like, for instance, I'm thinking they've got, what they haven't got with Gordon is they haven't got any eyewitnesses. They've got no tangible evidence, like, say, trace evidence, fingerprints, eyewitness, unexplained scratches on him, bruises, like, for instance, on his hands, or, like, it just got nothing in that sense. They have got no connection whatsoever between the scene and Ethel and Gordon. Unless I've missed something, they don't have any type of confession. His character evidence is exemplary. He was never, ever presumed innocent. Like, how often, and you don't have to be a police person to know that you're presumed innocent until proven guilty. You are presumed innocent until proven guilty. That never happened. They had it in their head to prove something that was not there. And what I could never find out if they ever seized his clothing. Like, if you had murdered somebody in the way that Ethel was murdered, it would be standard practice to do a search warrant, let's say, and get Gordon's clothing. I never read or found any evidence of them doing a search and getting his clothing for any sort of examination. Like, that's standard stuff. I said, what were these detectives doing?
So he's charged.
Yes.
With her murder.
Yep.
What happens then?
Right. So 1st of January was when she disappeared. It takes a while. There's a long investigation while they're sorting through all their thousands of potential witnesses. It's 8th of April before they charge him. And then we have a couple of weeks he's on bail. The inquest gets delayed because the coroner who saw Ethel's body down here is on leave. So we're into May by the time we actually get to a formal inquest.
Yeah.
Gordon's been on bail. His name's already been dragged through the mud. Things are getting pretty tense.
Yeah.
And then we get to the inquest.
Yeah.
And the first witness on the stand is Ethel's father. He does the formal identification of the body. But very importantly, he's then asked, what do you think of Gordon Knights? And he says, he's a fine, upstanding young man. He was in my scout troop. He is a very worthy person to be in Ethel's company, and I trust him 100%. Okay. Now, when the police have told you that this is the guy who's potentially killed your little girl, and he gets on the witness stand, you said that really tells you a lot about Ethel's father and about the sort of person Gordon Knights really was.
Aside from Ethel's father, Robert Belshaw, 29 other witnesses would give evidence at the inquest, which was held at Melbourne Morgue. Amongst them was the real killer, Arnold Sodeman. So you all sort of fall apart then, the case against him.
Well, it just seems to fall apart in the inquest. You know, the police, they're bringing people, they've got witnesses who seem very credible, who say, you know, there's a woman, a nurse, Mrs. Naomi Elmore, who was one of their very credible witnesses, who said, I was here, I saw a young girl and that young man, she identified him in court, they walked past me, I remarked to my friend on Ethel's hair, and I think she heard me because she tossed it as you know, as though she'd heard me, and he turned around and stared at me, and I got a very good look at, and they said, yeah, this was months ago, and she said, I've got a thing for faces, I can remember. And then Gordon's lawyer, he's Mr. Hartnett, he's got a legal rep at this stage, says, well, isn't it true, though, that you spoke to the police just a week or so ago to refresh your memory on this case? She's like, no. Didn't you ask to see the statement that you made? Oh, yes, I did. So this woman who has this very good recollection of faces and the upset had to go back just before the inquest and read through what she'd told them months ago.
Yeah.
And her friend, who she said I'd remarked to on Ethel's lovely hair, couldn't remember things. She said, I had a headache at the time, so, you know, I wasn't paying attention. She couldn't remember this conversation about the young girl and the young boy with the hair. And Mrs. Elmore's timing also changed. At first she'd said I was sitting there at 6 p.m, but suddenly she pulled it back to fit in with their timeline. Oh, it was 4:45, because we have formally established now that it was between 5 and 6 p.m. that Ethel was murdered, and that was based on the stomach contents, those tomato sandwiches that she'd had for lunch.
Yeah.
Although the prosecuting lawyer did say, well, couldn't she have eaten more tomato sandwiches later? You know, just, yes, but no. So, you know, there was, and then, wow, and then we had the very interesting theory about Ethel did it to herself.
Oh, now the Truth newspaper, the ironically named Truth newspaper.
Yes, very much so. So the ultimate level of victim blaming, really. And so this was one of the theories that was floated. And the Truth, of course, being the Truth, said, well, this came from our source inside the police department. And, you know, this theory was that Ethel had realised she'd stayed away from the group for too long, you know, and her mother had told her to be good. And she realised that she had not been good. So how was she going to cover her tracks and come up with an excuse? What does a young girl do? She fakes her own kidnapping. So the theory was that somehow she'd tied her legs together, stuffed a stocking in her own mouth, managed to tie her hands behind her back, and then the stocking in her mouth had choked her. It had gone too far. So
death by misadventure,
yes.
not murder.
Yes, needless to say, that one was ruled out fairly quickly. Okay. But the fact that it was even on the table for a moment, it's just mind-blowing.
Yeah, well, they're obviously no sort of rules back then as far as what you can publish.
So Gordon was grilled fairly heavily on the stand about the timeline, about what, you know, were you wearing your bathers, were you wearing a shirt, and were you wearing your suit over your bathers with or without a shirt?
Yeah.
Were you in the greasy barrel? Were you not in the greasy barrel? Were you in the water? And this, you know, the semantics, the minutiae of the timeline became a real issue because he'd sort of said, I was here, and it was half an hour later when he was there. So there was a bit of confusion. And the police were very heavily grilling him and his father on that. But ultimately, you know, there was nothing in it. They couldn't sort of make it stick that he was absent for that significant period of time when that, you know, 5 to 6 period when Ethel died.
Yeah.
But the other interesting thing that came out was James Jenkins, the cousin.
I was going to ask you. Yeah.
So James was the cousin who was with them on that day. He was down from Melbourne. He's a building contractor in Melbourne. He's also Gordon's boss. Gordon's an apprentice builder. And when he's down there working in Melbourne, he's staying with James. And so there was a little bit of questioning about James Jenkins, and he was on the stand too, and where did you search? And the other thing was, they asked Mr. Knight, was James Jenkins talking a lot about Mina Griffiths and Hazel Wilson? It's like, no. Did he mention it at all? He might have. I don't know. We talked about a lot of things. And there was this obsession, and this was the first time that suddenly we've got these other girls mentioned by the police in context with Ethel, and it just seemed a really weird aside. And then when James is on the stand and they ask him about that, were you talking about this? It's like, well, maybe. And they asked him where he'd been searching, and then suddenly it's like, well, where do you live? And it turns out that James, and therefore Gordon, when he's boarding in town, lives in a house in Alpena Street, which is basically equidistant between where Mina Griffiths' body was found and where Hazel Wilson was killed. And so this is a wild theory for 1935. Now we know they've got Gordon Knights. He's the one that they're trying to charge with this. He was too young. He was living in Tarwin Meadows when those other two girls were murdered. But James wasn't. He was down there right in the thick of it. And so someone somewhere is thinking, what if he's told Gordon? What if it's like this weird master-apprentice thing and he's told Gordon about strangling little girls? And now Gordon's had a crack. So it was never quite expressed like that, but it was...
like a mini kind of Coles or something.
Yeah. So really, a very daring theory for 1935.
Do you know, it is, and I reckon it's great that they're thinking outside the box. That do you actually air that, or do you sort of investigate it further, and maybe if you actually got something?
Yeah, well, I guess this is still the inquest. So if they could nail Gordon at this point, then they've got him for the criminal trial later on, and that could be something that they could then explore further.
Yep.
So this is, I think they're hoping for some sort of shock value here that they can get someone to trip over themselves and confess something at this point that's going to give them what they need later.
Yep. Gee, hell of a plot twist if that were true.
I feel like, really, James is taking Gordon under his wing and teaching him to kill. I mean, come on, Matt. You'll never be a detective if you believe that.
So in the end, the police are going to call their next witness, and the coroner says, "No, I think we've heard enough."
That's right. And Mr. Hartnett, Gordon's legal counsel, even said, he's here. I can put him on the stand. And the coroner said, "I don't need to hear any more here. This is it. It's murder by persons unknown." So the police tried to hang on to Gordon for a couple of days. They extended his bail period. But 2 days later, they had to drop all the charges against him. Mind you, he still had to subsequently change his name to be able to get a job. There was no compensation for everything he'd been through. The family, had spent a fortune getting legal counsel. There was nothing for them, but that was police business in 1935.
That's how it went. Yeah, wow. Next week on Sodeman, the schoolgirl strangler.
It's all fitting together. Yep. We've got 2 sightings of a guy with a little girl in a white dress, and now we know that what looked like carrying was actually sitting on the bicycle.
I think he realised that the game was up with June. I mean, he'd had people... I thought it was actually a completely different interview and a really good interview with June as opposed to Ethel.
My proof listener and editorial assistant is A. Dunn. Thanks too to Mark Drury for his introductory voiceover and theme music. And thanks to my wonderful guests, Katherine Kovacic and Narelle Fraser. Thanks for listening. See you next week.